And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by Andrew Johnson. And Johnson, we started with 68, we then got to 64, then got to 32, and now, as of this upcoming Thursday, we have 16 teams left in this NCAA tournament. Sweet 16 actually gets underway Thursday and Friday of this week, and we here today will be previewing those matchups as well as recapping what went down in the first and second round of this year's NCAA tournament. A couple of upsets have been had, not many of note. Maybe one in particular was the biggest of the entire tournament, but it seems as if some of the teams in this tournament that we expected to win have gotten through so far and now are in the Sweet 16 and 2 wins away from going to the Final Four.
Yeah, a lot of complaints about, there's no Cinderellas this year, even though there is a Cinderella here. It's just not your typical Cinderella.
Right.
A lot of people complaining, there's really no upsets. There's no, 14 seeds in the Sweet 16. I'm like, well, just because you're not getting a 13 or a 14 seed or even a 12 seed in the Sweet 16 doesn't mean the games aren't quality. And not to kind of spoil things, but that San Diego State UAB game was excellent, and the low seed did not win that game. Drake, Washington State, another excellent game. Low seed didn't win. And, there's all these, even a game like Dayton, Nevada, right? Where Dayton won by 3 points. But they were down 19 points with 8 minutes left and they came back and won. If you think that's not a good game of basketball, I don't know what to tell you.
Nevada needed a 24-4 run. Or Dayton, I'm sorry, needed that run to get back to beat Nevada in that game. That was a wild ride in that one.
And then you talk about Colorado, Florida, 202 combined points.
Yeah.
I know it's technically an upset, but a lot of people saw the Buffaloes as a favorite that game.
I like Florida a lot in the entire tournament. I really thought they could be a sleeper.
It's SEC basketball.
No, I know.
Kentucky, I don't really trust it.
That's fair. And I don't know if we can trust Kentucky anymore either.
Not since 2019.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that.
Yeah. But I mean, that could be a good segue to start off some of the upsets that have happened for that first round of this, in the second rounds of the NCAA tournament. Maybe we should talk about Kentucky and what happened with them in the first round. Jack Olke, Surly made a name for himself, and obviously you've seen it on Twitter. He's made some NIL deals after what happened in the first round matchup with Oakland and Kentucky. This is a matchup that you kind of expected a high scoring affair, and you pretty much got it in this game.
I don't think the over hit, though.
It did not hit, but it was
156 combined points. Yeah, it was enough to sneeze at.
It was 163, I think, was the over-under, so that's a tough line to hit. But regardless of that, I mean, you got a great game of basketball in this one. It was pretty much back and forth between the two teams. I mentioned Golke. He had, I think it was 10 3-pointers in this game, 32 points to finish with. And Oakland pulling off the biggest win in program history, knocking off the 3-seeded Kentucky Wildcats 80-76 the final in that game to advance to the second round of the NCAA tournament. So another first-round exit for Kentucky. That has unfortunately been a normal for them the last couple of seasons. We know what's happened a couple of years ago when they lost to St. Peter's. Now they lose this matchup to Oakland. People are speculating the status of Calipari. I don't think he gets fired yet, but he has a very expensive buyout.
I think he should have been fired a couple of years ago. But what they can do, and this is interesting, there's a clause in Calipari's contract that he could be moved to like a senior AD for like $1 million a year. So they don't technically have to buy him out. They can just
move him to a different role.
They can just move him. It's a public university at the end of the day. They can move him to a different role.
Yeah.
And you can bring someone else in.
Brad Stevens thing with the Celtics?
Kind of, yeah. In a sense, it's kind of like the Brad. Even though Brad Stevens was not fired, he chose to go there because Brad Stevens is an excellent head coach.
Right.
Apparently, even a better GM. But
that's near hearsay. But yeah, the Celtics obviously we know have had a good season in the NBA. But
I also want to mention Trey Townsend on Oakland. Unrecruited out of high school, got cut from his varsity team. Eventually makes the varsity team, wins a state championship, walks on at Oakland, gets a scholarship his freshman year, and now he almost made it to the Sweet 16, all because he was inspired when he was a kid. His dad brought him to an Oakland basketball game. So, crazy butterfly effect there.
Was he the one, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't his dad play for Oakland?
Yes, and he was a photographer.
Yes.
So that's a great, great story.
Yeah, I
I think
mean,
they had the same head coach too. I think Greg Campy was still there back in the
he's been
90s.
coaching for them for 40 years now. So yeah, he definitely was the coach. He was certainly was the coach at the time when that happened. But yeah, the good for the Golden Grizzlies. I mean, getting this win, cementing themselves for Oakland, who's obviously we know what the city of Oakland has dealt with the last couple of seasons when it comes to their professional sports teams, and they finally got something going their way with this
Well,
upset over Kentucky.
it's Oakland, Michigan, Nick. Oakland,
Well,
Michigan. You can still say
thank
the
you for
state
looking
of
on that
Michigan.
one. Thank you
You
for
can still
correcting me.
say that
Okay,
it's a suburb of Detroit.
it's
So
really
you're not wrong.
Michigan,
Yeah, it's
really.
Oakland. The only reason why I know about it is my cousins live out there.
Oh, you
Yeah,
know
my cousin's
what?
actually an alum of Oakland, so I have to reach out to him and see how he's feeling.
I saw a TikTok of someone, you parroting like an Oakland fan, and then them being like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're moving the university to Las Vegas" as a parody of like what's going on with the Raiders and the Athletics. So that's why I assumed it was they were in Vegas or whatever,
Yeah,
or not Vegas, sorry, in
They're
Oakland,
from
California.
Auburn Hills, Michigan, which if you remember had the
Really?
palace there.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, you can
All
still
right.
listen. It still sticks around. I know
Yeah,
you're
but
trying to.
now I kind of look
It's
bad looking saying that.
listen. It's Pistons, Red Wings, Tigers, and you finally have the Lions after 30 years of incompetence. So
Yeah.
hasn't been great there.
All right.
But I digress. Let's go into
Thanks
a
for
couple of.
correcting me though, because that looks pretty. That was pretty bad on my part. So I appreciate the. I appreciate that.
It happens. It happens. But
Yeah.
let's go into another couple teams that really underperformed, especially on the 8th seed. Florida Atlantic. We kind of all knew they did not deserve this 8th
I knew
seed,
you
and
wanted to go there.
Northwestern blew the doors off of him in overtime. I realized it was a close game, but when it came to OT, didn't even matter.
Well, that was a game in which referees were certainly playing into a factor,
Awful
and
officiating, and they probably gave Florida Atlantic 6 or 7 points.
I think that's why everyone was, upset by that game because they felt as if, and a lot of people could even say the same thing, that Florida Atlantic should not have been in that game in overtime. And Northwestern had a really good overtime period. They outscored them by 12 points. They won that game 77-65. They moved on to the second round. I mean, obviously their second round matchup didn't go fairly good for them as well. But yeah, Florida Atlantic, they're going to be under a new direction next season. We know that they lost. Correct me. I know his
Their
last name
head
was
coach.
May. I think is it Dusty May? His name
It is Dusty May.
Dusty May. Yeah, Dusty May. The going to be the new head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. So he's going to be replacing Juwan Howard there. So Florida Atlantic will be under some new direction this upcoming next season, and obviously it was a rocky road for them in year one in the American Athletic after making the Final Four last season. They made the NCAA tournament, even though some teams, as some people, as you mentioned, did not expect them or shouldn't, didn't think that they should make the
Not
tournament
definitely
this
not on
year.
the 8th seed line. A lot of people have them
Yeah,
as like the last
maybe
team
the
in,
last
or like
four
the
team.
second. Yeah, they did
Yeah,
not with two or three buys between them. That
yeah.
was ridiculous.
So yeah, we'll see what happens with them. But I mean, Northwestern. I mean, that's a program that's had some bad luck in the NCAA tournament for decades now, and they were able to get an overtime win, even though the second round matches didn't go their way. They at least got a tournament win this year.
Still staying in the East region. Just to kind of recap a couple games that really didn't have much to talk about. Illinois beating Morehead State, Iowa State beating South Dakota State, and UAB just barely losing to San Diego State. We thought that was going to be an upset for a little bit, especially towards the end there. It was all knotted up, but San Diego State just managed just to kind of squeak by. But let's talk about the couple upsets in this. Of course, Washington State over Drake. Also another close game.
Drake should
Can't
have had
forget
that game too.
Drake should have had that game too. And there's another team I really want to talk about that should have had that game, but they didn't. But let's talk about the two big upsets. I guess we could start with Duquesne over BYU. Duquesne getting their first, I think, NCAA tournament win in 40 years or 50 years since the
I think 50
70s.
because I know that they won when Norm Nixon was there when they went the last time in the tournament.
Yeah, so his first tournament win in over 4 decades, and the head coach announced he was going to retire at the end of it, so he gets to retire on a high note. Uh, Former head coach of St. Vincent St. Mary's High School in Akron, Ohio.
Obviously, Coach LeBron, his
Coach
first few
LeBron
years.
back in the early 2000s, and LeBron was rooting for him. So really good, great story there. And the big upset that came out of East were the Yale Bulldogs over the Auburn Tigers. Feels like every single year there's an Ivy League team that takes down a major power.
Yeah, they took down the reigning SEC champions. Auburn was coming off a high after winning that SEC title, and they really just faltered in the second half of this game. They had a 7-point lead going into halftime, and they just kind of went Yale's way, and they were able to make some big clutch shots down the stretch of this game and able to hold on for that 2-point victory over the Auburn Tigers. And like you said, this is a Yale team. Keep in mind, when they play in the Ivy League title game, they were seconds away from losing that game. They had to
They
win on a
needed
buzzer beater
they
just to
needed
get
God
it.
himself to intervene.
Right. They needed everything to go their way down the stretch of that game. I think they played Brown, if I'm not mistaken, that Ivy League game. You can
Yes,
correct
it
me
was
if I'm wrong.
Brown.
But they needed a buzzer beater to get into the NCAA tournament. They get in as a 13 seed, and lo and behold, they beat the Auburn Tigers, who just came off an SEC championship win in their tournament. So good job again by Yale. Obviously, they've had some recent tournament success from years prior, and they get a first round win over the Auburn Tigers, and pretty much a stunner because I think a lot of people expected Bruce Pearl and his team to maybe make it to this part of the tournament, the Sweet 16.
Yeah, disappointment again out of the SEC. Great win for Yale and the Bulldogs in the Ivy League. James Jones is a quality quality coach. 25 years there, not a single scholarship, multiple NCAA tournament wins, and berths. He won the Ivy League 6 times. Runs a clean program, and I think he would go to any Power 5 school and knock it out of the park. So if he ever wanted to leave Yale, I think he'd go to any Power 5 school, and he would be, I don't want to say unstoppable, but he would have him dancing as a mid to high seed almost every year.
Yeah.
But let's go into the West region now.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this could kind of wrap up a couple games that I'm not gonna say it didn't matter, but they weren't upsets. Arizona over Long Beach State by 20. Baylor over Colgate by 25. Alabama over Charleston in a boat race. Excuse me, combining for over 200 points. Alabama 109, Charleston 96.
Yep.
And of course, our Wagner Seahawks, not my team, but my hometown, getting absolutely trounced by North Carolina. Yeah, they look good for about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
for 10 minutes, it's like, wow, they look pretty good. And then they got like...
The second half kind of happened.
They had 2 players with 3 fouls, and like, okay, that's not bad, but they have 7 players. So that was pretty much the entire team there.
Yeah.
And then we had a couple of, we mentioned the squeak with Dayton before, coming back from being down 20 points and beating Nevada as the 7th seed. And then we get to a couple games where they were definitely upsets. This one may not be surprising, but Tom Izzo by 18 over Mississippi State in the 8-9 matchup. I mean, listen, not a great showing for the SEC so far this tournament. It can still turn around, but it's Izzo in March, so what can you really expect?
Yeah,
you kind of walk yourself into that one.
It's kind of funny because they were my Cinderella team, obviously, and they were the first game of the tournament, and they got trounced immediately. So my Cinderella pick was immediately knocked out of the tournament. But yeah, can't really bet against Tom Izzo when he's an underdog in the game. Even though what happened in the second round happened, you still have to give Izzo his flowers, and obviously they were able to pretty much dominate Mississippi State in that first round matchup.
And I want to talk about domination, and this game, it wasn't an upset, but my Cinderella got blown up by 21 points by Clemson. I thought New Mexico was going to make a run for it, and they just weren't there. Jamal Mashburn Jr. came out flat. He's now in the transfer portal now. Went 1 of 11 from the field, so just not a great showing from him. Nelly Jr. Joseph is probably the strongest player. Not really a great look. And JT Toppin, they really want to retain him, but he didn't have a great game as well. But Richard Pitino Jr., rumored to go to Louisville. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And
the big upset was GCU over St. Mary's. However, this was a popular one, right? This was like, even with the books, it was only 5.5-point favorites. West Coast Conference versus GCU. It was kind of in their backyard too. I believe the game was in Spokane, so it was kind of like a neutral site game. Both West Coast teams, but GCU just outclassed them.
Yeah, and it was one where it was a close first half between the two teams. They weren't really scoring as much points as they did, obviously, in the second half of that game. But this was funny to me because I saw Jay Billis was talking about this game and saying, why is GCU a 5.5 point underdog? He expected St. Mary's to be a higher point differential favorite in this game, and the reason that it was like this is because you saw what happened in the second half. Their defense really fell flat. The Antelopes were pretty much, in my opinion, dominating on the glass, getting a lot of opportunities to get some buckets, outscoring them 47-39 in that second half and getting a 9-point win. They were my first round upset for that region. So I was happy to see the Antelopes get their I think that is their first. Actually, no, that is their first ever NCAA tournament win.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
so it was good to see them win that game, and they put up a great showing in the second round too, as well against Alabama. I mean, really, they fought in that game as well, and they really had a good chance to pull off that upset as well.
And if you are a believer in Grand Canyon education, they are actually a for-profit university. Yes, a for-profit university, and you can actually buy them on the Nasdaq under this ticker exchange LOPE, LOPE.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're actually up in the last 2 years about 55% or so. So if you want to get in on investing in Grand Canyon University, think they're going to be a
I
powerhouse in the
would
future, you can go invest in them right now in the
I would
stock
love
market.
for them to be in the new like NCAA football game and just take them to the promised land. They say that would be a fun dynasty to go over with for Grand Canyon. They are a fun team to watch. But you could say the same case for another team that was another 12 seed in the NCAA tournament, Johnson, that also pulled off a first round upset, and that would be James Madison. How about their showing against Wisconsin? They really shut down the Badgers in this one defensively. It seemed like AJ Store Company just could not get any good open looks against James Madison in this game. And it was all Dukes. They pretty much dominated, even though the score indicates an 11-point win for James Madison. It seemed like even further than that, the way Wisconsin was playing in this one.
Yeah, it was not close. It was a lot. It was a lot bigger of a score differential than the scoreboard indicates. Like you said, AJ Store is really the only one that was kind of getting it going.
He tried everything he could, but it just was
At the
never
end
going
of
to
the day, it
work.
was just too much. I know he's withdrawing now to go test the NBA draft waters. He
He's
seems like a good prospect.
Well, keep in mind he's keeping his college eligibility, so he still has a chance to go back.
Right. There are rumors that he may transfer schools, so we'll see what happens there. But great win for the Dukes there, and ironically, they played Duke in the next round. Uh, but let's go into the rest of these games.
Yeah,
We kind of mentioned Colorado before over Florida before, Marquette over Western Kentucky, Houston over Longwood by
there's
40.
a game
No,
I'm gonna wait to see if you bring up because there was some controversy surrounding that one too.
yeah, that's going to be not in this bracket. It's going to be in the next bracket.
Yeah, yeah,
So you can wait for just a little bit.
sure, yeah,
We
go ahead.
Duke over Vermont by 17. Nothing really there. But then we have a couple closer games here. Nebraska gets waxed again in the NCAA tournament. They are now 0-9 or 0-8 in NCAA tournament. So the only Power 5 school never to win a tournament game.
And keep in mind their football program hasn't made a bowl game in 8 years, so it's been rough going for Nebraska athletics this last couple of years.
Fred Hoiberg has them on the right track. They'll
He
eventually get
does.
a tournament win. Maybe they'll be like a 7 or a 6 seed next year, and they
Yeah,
can get that nice win. We mentioned the Oakland Golden Grizzlies beating the Kentucky Wildcats and John Calipari's status before. And we got to talk about it, right? We got to talk about the 6 over the 11, the Big 12 getting outclassed by NC State. DJ Burns continues to be on a roll now. He's kind of this folk hero in North Carolina right now, just kind of willing them to prove a tournament. He just refuses to leave or to even just he doesn't want to go home. He's averaging 20 points this tournament on 70% shooting.
yeah,
A back to basket type player, doesn't take 3-pointers. And again, Texas Tech, another Big 12, another good quote unquote Big 12 team, the fourth best team in the Big 12, gets hosed by the ACC, a middle of the pack team.
yeah. We've certainly seen in this tournament the Big 12. I know you'll talk about the Mountain West as well, and even the SEC. They've all had pretty rough showings in this tournament, despite considering the
They're not
fact
good conferences. I don't care what
considering the
anyone says.
fact
Because I
that they
said this
added
beginning of the year
all
too.
those teams.
When we not to talk over you, but when we did this 6 months ago or 5 months ago when we had our preview show, I said, hey, these are not good conferences. I said, and you can probably you replay it. I said when it comes down to March, the Big East is going to have 3 teams in the Sweet 16. They're going to have at least 2 in the Elite Eight. I don't care about all these other conferences. And guess what? We're on pace for it right now. They say, oh, yeah, the Big 12 is good. They beat up on each other. Yeah, but they play crap teams out of conference and they got washed by the ACC, which, by the way, statistically, not a great conference either, but they're having an even better March in the Big East, which is hard to believe.
Yeah, the ACC has got a couple teams left in the Sweet 16. The Big 12
Quarter of the
has just
teams
yeah,
are ACC. Half the teams are pretty much ACC Big
Big
East.
East. Yeah, yeah, and then you have like the Big 12. They only have 2 teams left. The SEC has only 2 teams left. The Mountain West has, I think, just 1 team left.
One team, and they shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Um, and then I think the Pac-12 has just Arizona, right? I think they don't think they have any other teams left
Yeah,
over.
that's it. And obviously, there's the West Coast Conference in there too, and there's a couple other
Right.
things.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, let's go to the final bracket, the Midwest. Purdue over Grambling State by 28. Nothing crazy. Tennessee destroyed St. Peter's. Really wanted them to go on a run, but whatever. Utah State over TCU. Mount Fraud versus Bigger Fraud. By
There was
16
no
points.
defense play in that game. I watched that one. There was no defense being played whatsoever.
No defense. Gonzaga over McNeese State. We kind of went over the scheduling that McNeese State had
We
during the
thought
year.
McNeese maybe could pull off that upset,
Well,
but
you had Will Wade. The team looked good on
yeah,
paper, 30 wins, but again, it's McNeese State for a reason.
and it's Gonzaga. There's still a prestigious program to
Coaching
get
will only
wins.
get
Yeah.
you so far, and we know Will Wade's a great coach. Just his recruiting
Just
practices are a
Mark Few's
little
a better
shady,
one. Yeah.
and he's got better talent too, way better talent. Creighton over Akron by 17 points. Really not a.
That was close in the first half. It was a closer first half between those
Yeah,
two.
I mean Akron was kind of lighting it up from behind the arc, and then they kind of cooled down in the second half, and Creighton just kind of put their foot to the gas pedal, and that was really the end of that game. And we have a couple, and this was the worst game of basketball I've ever seen in my life. Colorado
Oh,
State,
yes.
11 points in the first half, the second to last team in. So now you had Virginia and Colorado State, which played the worst
Well,
game I've ever seen up until this game against Texas.
have you noticed the rippling effect of Virginia so far in this tournament? Have
They
you
keep
seen?
on infecting teams.
Yes. So obviously Virginia had 14 points in their playing game against Colorado State and obviously lost big. Then Colorado State scored 11 in their matchup with Texas. There was only a combined 100 points scored between these two teams. Both of them did not deserve to win. And then I think Texas had
Scored 19.
18 or 19. There you go. They had 19 against Tennessee in their second round matchup with the Volunteers. So
Tennessee, you're next.
yeah, Tennessee. I don't know. Tennessee could be in trouble in their next matchup. They have a tough
The winners
matchup.
coming out of the
Sweet
north.
16.
I'm sorry, the winners coming out of the east or the west. Now it's coming out of the opposite side of the bracket.
Well, I mean, we both have UConn, so I mean it would work
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Anyways, we have
Anyway.
Oregon over South Carolina, which was kind of surprising. But when you really think about it, South Carolina had probably a crappy end of the season here.
Yeah, they struggled down the stretch.
Still, 26 wins. You expect them to get a
For
little
a
more.
team that-
Second best team in the SEC.
For a
But
team that was, I mean, they were projected to finish dead last in the SEC too. Keep in mind, so I mean,
yeah, still a
they
great.
definitely
Listen,
exceeded expectations.
if you're a South Carolina fan, you take this season and you kind of stick it in your cap. The best season they've had probably since their
And
Final
you
Four
got-
run a couple of years ago.
Right, and you got to think about it. Jermaine Coussard from Oregon put 40 points on them. I mean, he just went absolutely ballistic for the Ducks in that matchup.
Yeah, and he went ballistic the next game too.
He
But
did.
we got to talk about this Kansas-Sanford game.
Yep.
Kansas got ultimately bailed out by her refs again. The cleanest block you'd ever see, even on the replay. And this is what I loved about this NCAA tournament. When I was watching some of these games, they were stopping and replaying everything every single time there was a call made, right?
Yep.
Like, okay, out of bounds. Let's make sure it is who it is. But that block didn't get reviewed. You can't tell me if it wasn't financial incentives behind that to make sure Kansas wins a game in this tournament to make the Big 12 look a little bit better, because Stanford should have won that game. Plain and simple. They got it. They got robbed. And for a school like that, the money going to that school would mean so much. I think that was Stanford's first NCAA appearance since the year 2000. So could have done a lot for their recruiting. Kansas did not need that. Kansas could have lost and it would have been fine. But here we are again, though, talking about bad refs.
Well, in fairness, the only good thing that came out of it was what happened to Kansas the second round, because they
got exposed.
Yeah, they did not have a good matchup in their second round matchup with Gonzaga, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, but it kind of wraps up the round of 64, and I don't think we really need to go over the round of 32 that much because pretty much everything went as expected here. Just to kind of run down a couple games, it was UConn over Northwestern, the 1/9. San Diego State over Yale, the 5/13. Both those games non-competitive. Illinois destroyed Duquesne, the 3/11 by 26 points. Iowa State had a closer game with Washington State, the 2/7. UNC destroyed Michigan State. Alabama destroyed GCU. Clemson Baylor was a little bit closer. I guess that's the one upset we have in this round, or the second upset we have in this round, excuse me. Baylor again, ACC beating the Big 12. Seen this. This is probably they're probably 11-3 this season head to head. If I had just off the top of my head right now, so
Yeah.
the Big 12 has not matched up well with the ACC at all, even in the tournament. So you can say, oh well, it's in November; those games don't count. Yeah, but now it's March and they're still getting their heads kicked in, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, well, think about what we've had in the second round. There have been a couple of matches that maybe on paper also like score wise that didn't seem as competitive, but they were still competitive whatsoever. I mean, Tennessee and Texas, that game came down to the wire. Creighton and Oregon went to double overtime.
That was a good game,
NC State and Oakland was pretty much back and forth up
great
until the
game.
very last moment. Marquette and Colorado played a hell of a game on Sunday. That game could have gone either way for both of
I
those two
pulled over on the
teams.
side of I pulled over in a parking lot to watch the end of that game.
I'm sure you did. Someone that I was watching on a YouTube live stream got pulled over, but that's near here to say. And then obviously the Texas A&M game with Houston certainly
That
had
was
its
electric.
dramatics, but
If you had to
yeah.
see any game, that if they had pulled that off, that was gonna be better than the Iowa State of the Northern Iowa comeback.
And keep in
That they,
mind, remember who did Northern Iowa do that
they
against?
did that. Well, I mean, the Aggies did it against Northern Iowa.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It was the
Yeah,
Aggies that did it against them.
that would have
They almost
been
did it
way
again.
better. It would have been so good because they came back. They were down over 10 points with 55 seconds. They get to
Right,
OT,
and it's
and
against the number one seed.
against the number one seed, probably the best offense in college basketball. And at the end of the day, Wade Taylor the fourth.
They can only do so much. There was so much foul trouble for
I mean, here's the thing: he was
for
a
them,
chucker the entire year. Don't
yeah,
get me wrong, but in a game like this, you had to bench him. He shot under 20%. If he had shot 25%, they would have won this game. If
yeah.
he shot 35%, they would have won this game by 15 points.
I know, but I think the issue was obviously they had, going into they had the game go to overtime one, and then you had all the foul trouble for both teams. I mean, obviously Houston had a bunch of players fouling out.
I know you had Tyrese
Um,
Radford there, who
there,
was
there
having
was
an excellent game.
there were certainly shots that he shouldn't have taken during overtime because there was that one where he took it at the logo
Horrific.
when they were down four, where they didn't even
Yeah,
need to take the three because they were still about
55
30.
seconds.
Yeah, not even that. There's well, yeah, he did take one that earlier on, but there was also one where he took. They were down four. It was like 25 seconds, and all you need to do is just try to set up a play to go to the rim and just get it easy too, and just obviously foul after that. But Texas A&M was obviously grateful to be in that spot, considering they were down 11 with about a minute 19 left in that game.
Yeah, that game would have went down in March Madness folklore for the next 50 years. Everyone would put. I'd be talking about that game till I died.
Yeah, and Houston would not be forgetting that game if they were to have lost that one. But if that's the case, Johnson, is there anything other than the in this second round that you want to talk about before we preview this Sweet 16 that we have coming up that's starting on Thursday?
No, because pretty much all the high seeds made it. All the low
Or-
seeds made it, excuse me. The only high seeds here are NC State, which we went over, the game against Oakland, and Clemson, which is the 6th seed. And that's not really too egregious to see a 6th seed in the Sweet 16. Try
Yeah.
saying that 3 times fast.
But keep in mind, it is the first time since 2019 that all the 1 and 2 seeds have advanced to the Sweet 16. So it's been a little bit of a
We had
time.
gone over this too, that
But yeah.
it was more than due because we even said like, hey, listen, I know last year we had a 4, 5, and I think another 4. I think the average seed was 5 or 6 last year because
Mhm.
Florida Atlantic was an 8 and the highest seed was a 4, which I think was UConn. Correct me if I'm
Yes.
wrong on
I
that.
think
So
you're right.
we said, hey, it's got to kind of regress to the mean here, and it was oh well, this is a wide open tournament, blah blah blah. I don't care, and here we are. It's regressing to the mean because it looks like there's not going to be many 4 or 5 seeds here. It's going to probably be all 1, 2, and 3s in the final 4, barring anything crazy to happen.
Right. So, with that being said, obviously Thursday is a jam-packed day for the entire world of professional sports. We talked about it yesterday on the show. We previewed the MLB opening day season. That also begins this Thursday. But also on Thursday is the start of the Sweet 16, and we will be conducting a mushing hour. And Johnson, for those that have been with us throughout the entire NFL and NCAA football season, some might know what this means, but for our college basketball listeners, what does the mushing hour entail?
Well, the mushing hour is when winners become losers and losers become winners here. Kind of like a play on the witching hour from Red Zone. And we're gonna both kind of like, oh, this is a lock, this is gonna happen. Usually the opposite happens.
Yeah.
very rarely do we both go, "Oh yes, both these things are going to happen," and it kind of just blows up in our face.
Well, yeah, and look what happened when we previewed the exact tournament. We both picked Drake over Washington State. They lost, unfortunately. I had McNeese in the Midwest getting the upset over Gonzaga. They lost by 20. Sanford got robbed against Kansas. We got our South regional upsets correct. I had NC State over Texas Tech. You had James Madison beating Wisconsin. I had GCU over St. Mary's in the West. New Mexico, unfortunately, did not get it done against Clemson, and then because of that happening, they were also your Cinderella pick. They got knocked out, and I had Mississippi
But
State. And
all our regional winners are
they're
still
all
alive.
still alive, and that's surprising considering last season. I think they were all out. Pretty much all of them were gone after the first round.
I might have had UConn last year.
I had UConn for sure. I'd have to look it up. I could tell you in a second
Yeah,
who we
it's
had.
it's it's not important right now,
But
but
yeah, but anyway, why don't you preview our first Sweet 16 matchup that we have upcoming on Thursday?
so out of the West region, we have the number 2 seeded Arizona. It's not Sun Devils, it's Wildcats,
Arizona
right?
Wildcats. Yep,
Arizona Wildcats versus the Clemson.
Tigers.
Oh, Clemson Tigers. Jeez,
I got you. Don't worry.
I'm
Listen, you
struggling
helped
today
me.
too.
Listen, you helped me earlier. I'm helping you now. That's what we're here for.
I wanted to say the Sun Devils, but I knew that was Arizona State, so I knew that was wrong. So we have Arizona is a 7.5 point favorite, and the over under is slated at 151.5. I have Clemson plus 7.5 here.
Okay.
I think the ACC is as a whole is better than the Pac-12. This is the swan song for the Pac-12.
Yeah, the
This
last
could
team
be. I
left.
don't think Clemson will win, but I think they'll at least cover here. It'll be a lot closer than even 8 points.
Yeah, Clemson fans, I'm sorry, but I agree with him. I think Clemson plus 7.5 is a good pick. Is a good pick here. They showed a great outing against Baylor in their last matchup in the second round. Obviously, winning that game outright by 8 points. Arizona, realistically, if you look at that matchup with Dayton, it was a lot closer than a 10 point game. Dayton kept fighting back and forth with them, and they were getting a lot of good 3 point shots. The reason why Arizona got the win at the end of the day was their defense intensity towards the end of it picked up, and that's why they were able to hold on. Dayton also had a couple opportunities open wise, and they just couldn't make the wide open shots at the end of the game, and that's really what came down to it. I think Clemson will keep it close as well, and I still think Arizona wins. Obviously, I had Arizona making it into the Final Four, so not going to defer from that pick, but I do think Clemson loses. I'll say it by 5 points in this one. But before I go into the Johnson, I do have our picks from last year, and I'll go over it quickly. Um, the only pick that was correct was I had UConn. You did not have UConn out of the. They were in the West region last year.
Okay.
You had Kansas coming out of the West.
Kansas.
In fact, the only correct pick out of all of our picks was me having UConn out of the West.
Yeah, I believe it. I thought I would have maybe had UConn, but
Yeah, so your
I
Final Four
definitely
you
wasn't
had
picking Arizona at San Diego State. I wasn't
yeah
picking
Florida
I wasn't gonna
Atlantic.
pick Florida Atlantic. I
Yeah,
wasn't
you
picking
have
any of it.
Purdue, Xavier, Baylor, and
Oh,
Kansas.
Purdue.
Yeah, I had Duke, Texas, Alabama, and UConn. Alabama win the national championship, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't believe in Alabama at least.
yeah. You believed in Purdue though, but
Yep,
so
yep. Unfortunately, that's why I didn't pick them this year.
but
Anyways,
anyway, now let's go to the
we
second game.
we have
And
out of our East region, we have the number 1 seeded, number 1 overall seed, UConn Huskies versus the San Diego State Aztecs. UConn is a 10.5 point favorite, over underslated at 135.5. I do like the over here, but I'm gonna take UConn minus 10.5. Best team in the tournament. I think they'll win by 11 or 12 points. San Diego State will definitely give them fits. I think this is gonna be their biggest challenge they've had so far. But give me UConn by 11 here,
keep in mind this is the rematch of the national championship game from last season
which we all know how
between
it
the
went
two.
last year.
Yeah,
UConn
you
kind of just rolled them.
and I think it's going to happen the same way in this one. San Diego State obviously had a great show against Yale in the second round, but look at UConn's first two games. I know it was against Stetson in round one. They showed up another good game against Northwestern in round two, but look what they've just done all season. I mean, they've been blowing out teams that we are even seeing that are currently in the tournament still left. Teams like Marquette and Creighton that are still alive. They have blown them out during the regular season, and they are just a well-oiled machine, as I mentioned before we went into our tournament preview. I don't see a scenario where San Diego State keeps it close. I think UConn could win this game by 20, in my opinion. So I will also go with UConn minus 10.5. So two mushes so far. We are
This
right
is
on
great.
cue. Yeah.
Remember, they could still win, but They would just they'd win by more or less because it could be a true mush. They could still win this game, but if UConn wins by 4 points, we still lose. Anyways, out of the West region, we have the number one seeded North Carolina Tar Heels going against the Alabama Crimson Tide Roll Tide. Uh, UNC is a 4.5 point favorite over underslayed at 173.5. That is not a typo. That's 173 points
Well,
in a
there's a
college
reason
game. They're
why that's the
expecting to get
case.
almost 80 points apiece, or over 80 points apiece, like 90, 85 points apiece.
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow. Give me UNC minus 4.5, and I'm not going to touch that over under.
Yeah, I would not touch it, although I could see it very much well going over. These are two of the highest scoring teams in all of college basketball. The biggest issue for Alabama all season, though, for them, Johnson, has been their team defense, and that is really a cause for concern for them. North Carolina in that game of Michigan State, we saw they started off very slowly. It looked like the Spartans were maybe going to pull off the upset. It was 28-16, and then the Tar Heels started to go on an absolute run, took the lead, and they never surrendered that lead. So it's tough for me to really. I want to pick Alabama, but their defense is really a cause for concern. And I'm going to take UNC minus 4.5 as well. I also had them making the Elite Eight when we went over our prediction show. Actually, no, I'm actually wrong, but I had Mississippi State. I completely forgot about that. So disregard that. But regardless of that, I think when it comes down to it, I don't trust Alabama's defense in the end of the day against a North Carolina team that has been coached very well by Hugh Davis and all of his staff, and they have a lot of good playmakers on that team. Baycott's been a monster for them. Davis is also one of the better guards in all of college basketball. I just don't see how Alabama contends with it.
Alrighty then. We have out of the East region the number two seed. Excuse me, Iowa State Cyclones versus the number three Illinois Fighting Illini. How do I remember that name, but not the Arizona Wildcats? I'll never remember.
You're so
Iowa
focused on Sun Devils.
Iowa State is a 1.5 point favorite in the over under slate at 146.5. Give me Illinois plus 1.5 here. I think the Big 12 is a bunch of frauds, and I think Illinois may win this one outright. And if they lose on a heartbreaking buzzer beater or by a point at the end there, I'll still cover. So give me Illinois plus 1.5 here.
I've had trouble picking this game a lot because I really want to make the case for Illinois. And they looked pretty good in their first two matchups. Obviously, they started off slow with Morehead State, but then they picked it up at the end, and then they pretty much blew out Duquesne from the start of that game. Iowa State started off slow against Washington State, but they obviously won by double digits, and then they got past the Jackrabbits and South Dakota State in the first round. I'm going to go with Iowa State minus 1.5. I don't trust it, but I think for
No mush.
I think for show purposes, I think we're going to try to make sure we don't have as many mushes as possible. So I'll go with the Cyclones to get to the Elite Eight.
All right, and the next game we have, we out of the South region, we have the number two Marquette Golden Eagles versus the number 11 seeded North Carolina State Wolfpack. Marquette is a 6.5 point favorite and over underslayed at 151.5. Now, I was originally going to take Marquette minus 6.5. However, this is Shaka Smart in March, and he hasn't performed the last couple of years. He hasn't really performed since he was at BCU. When he was at Texas, he wasn't really that great, and Marquette, he had a couple early exits. So I'm going to take NC State plus 6.5. I think Marquette will win this game, but I'm going to take NC State plus 6.5 because I'm not going to bet against DJ Burns or this miracle title run they're having at the end of the year.
Well, keep in mind you had Marquette in the Final Four, so
I do.
you obviously do want Marquette to win,
I
but
think they're going to win, but I think NC State's going to cover.
well, you looked at what Marquette has done, and we kind of know what this was going to be all along. Tyler Kolek has been an absolute tear for the Golden Eagles this tournament. But you mentioned DJ Burns from NC State; he's been on an absolute tear since the ACC tournament started for the Wolfpack. Obviously, winning 5 games in 5 days to win the championship, and then obviously winning their first two matchups in the NCAA tournament. I'm having trouble with this one too because I really think NC State might cover, but I also want to make the case for Marquette to hold on. I hate to do this, Johnson. I'm going to go with the over in this game. I think there's a lot of good players in this game overall, and the team defenses that I've seen so far from both of these teams haven't played as great in this tournament, and especially in their first two games, respectively, for each of them. So I could see a lot of points being scored between the two. And for your sake, keeping it a very close game where NC State could cover it.
Alrighty then. We have the number one seeded Purdue Boilermakers versus the number five seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs. Think of the Bulldogs, right?
Yes.
Yes. I have Midwest region. Purdue is a 5.5 point favorite over underslee at 145 and a half, 154 and a half, excuse me. Give me Purdue. I'm sorry, give me Gonzaga plus 5.5 here. I can't trust Zach Edey yet. He's let me down a couple times. I hope he gets it, but I can't trust him yet. With that being said, give me Gonzaga plus 5.5.
Yeah, I've been burned. I've been burned by Purdue so many times before, and I'm like wondering to myself, do I really want to like do it again? I'm gonna go with Bull Johnson. I'm taking Gonzaga money line.
Money
I
line. That's like plus. That's like plus 200.
yeah, I've done this before with Purdue. I think it's gonna come down to guard play, and I think Nemhard is going to be the reason why Gonzaga wins this game. They blew out Kansas in that second round matchup after it was a close first half. They got away from them in the second half. Purdue obviously hasn't had a tough test yet in this tournament. This will by far be their toughest test to come to date. And I think if Gonzaga implements a game plan like Wisconsin did in the semifinal of the Big Ten tournament, then I think Gonzaga can win it outright and move on to the Elite Eight. So give me the Bulldogs and Gonzaga to move on to the Elite Eight with a win.
All right, and we have the number one seeded Houston Cougars out of South Region taking on the number four seeded Duke Blue Devils. Houston is a 4.5 point favorite, and the over underslayed at 135.5. Kind of low when you look at the rest of this. This kind of sticks out,
Yeah.
especially when you see the Cougars' offense is so prominent here, so potent. With that being said, give me Houston minus 4.5. Experience wins in March, and Duke's kind of a younger team, so give me the Cougars.
Oh, but if you know Johnson, I have Duke winning the entire region of the South when we originally did our selection show. So I will not defer from that pick. I'm going to go with Duke money line in this one. Um, I am concerned. Obviously, experience does matter when it comes to the NCAA tournament, but I think when I look at these two teams, from what I saw from Houston in the late stages of that game with A&M, that's obviously a cause for concern. And Duke was flat out dominant against James Madison. I know it's not a team caliber of what Houston is, but I think Duke could give the Cougars a lot of problems in this game. Kyle Filipowski, I think he could have a monster game, and Tyrese Proctor, I think, is the one to look out for when these two teams play. I think Duke has enough ability to outlast the Cougars in this one. And I'll take Duke to go all the way to the Elite Eight. And obviously, I have them winning the region, so I'll have them going to the Final Four. So give me the Blue Devils to win this one.
And finally, but last but not least, we have out of the Midwest region, we have the number two seeded Tennessee Volunteers. Again, how to remember that, but not the previous ones. Versus the number three Creighton Blue Jays. Tennessee is a 2.5 point favorite, and the over underslayed at 144.5. Give me Creighton plus 2.5, and I think they win it outright. I'm going to take the Big East over the SEC here, and hopefully we're getting three Big East teams in the Elite Eight.
Well,
That's
that
my
was
dream.
your prediction when we made our original prediction show. So
I had them all in the
that's
Final
fair.
Four.
You did.
I had all of them in the Final Four plus UNC. I want to go back to 1985.
There is a very strong chance that could still happen. So
Give it about 10%. It was probably 1% a week ago. It's probably about 10% right now. So
yeah, and considering how Creighton, they were in a little bit of trouble when it came against Oregon. They had to obviously go double overtime, and they were able to outlast the Ducks in double overtime. And I mentioned Tennessee had a little bit of a scare, almost blowing that game against Texas, but they were able to hold on by 4. I have Tennessee, obviously. I had them making it out of the Midwest and going all the way to the Final Four. I can't really defer from that away either. I would like to see Creighton win this game. I think on paper, for me, I think they are a little bit of a better team than Tennessee is, but I don't know what it is about the Volunteers. I think they just get it done. They probably will just knowing my luck will probably play like crap in the first half, and then that will obviously end their run, and Creighton will take advantage of that. But something just tells me that Dalton Connect is going to be the reason why the Volunteers win this game. So I got Tennessee winning, and obviously I have them making it into the Final Four. So
okay, that'll kind of wrap up our mushing out here.
yeah,
And before we sign off, Is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners?
So keep in mind, after today, obviously the Elite Eight takes place on Saturday and Sunday. So after Easter Sunday this upcoming week, we are going to know the final four teams for the NCAA tournament. So anything is really possible. The fact that we still have all of our teams alive right now, Johnson, I think is pretty much a godsend.
I went 12 for 16 in my Sweet 16 bracket, in my main bracket. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Couldn't even tell you what my Sweet 16 bracket was. It was
75%'s not bad. I'll take it.
Yeah. I know. I think I have a better percentage of the women's bracket, than the men's bracket. I just made a women's bracket, so I said, why not? And that's gotten better. I think my percentage for the men's bracket was 69%, though. So I'll take that as a win.
I think mine was 82, so I'll take it.
Yeah. But yeah, no. I mean, think about it. We started with 68, got down to 64, then down to 32. Now we're at 16.
Soon to be 8.
Soon to be 8 after on Thursday and Friday. And then, of course, we will know the Elite Eight, and then we will get to the Final Four, and we'll get one step closer to finally seeing who will be playing for the national championship. So I'm excited. But Johnson, we still have a jam-packed show for us next week. Obviously, we will recap the Elite Eight and the Sweet 16, and obviously preview the Final Four matchups. But we would also be remiss if we didn't bring up another certain thing that's happening next week for us. WrestleMania is on the horizon, so we will be previewing WrestleMania next week here on the show, giving our predictions for the matches that will be going down at WrestleMania, and obviously maybe giving a spoiler at what we think could potentially happen, potential surprise-wise for the show of the Immortals. But we are certainly looking forward to being at that show next week, and we're just counting down the days. I think, what are we now?
11 days.
11 days now? Yeah. And technically for us, 10 days, because we're going to be leaving on Friday for that show. So, certainly next week's going to be a jam-packed week for us here on the All Gas No Break Sports Show, but we are certainly looking forward to that. But that will do it for this week's edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. We're down to 16 teams left in the NCAA tournament. After Sunday, we will be down to 4. But first, we need to get to 16 to 8. Saturday and Sunday will bring us the Elite Eight action, and then we'll get to that Final Four and preview the Final Four next week here on the show, as well as previewing WrestleMania. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by Andrew Johnson with the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.